So when I talk, and I actually talk to kids using this metaphor too. When I talk about writing, I use a metaphor of a stove. And the idea behind the stove is that your front burners are the things that are processing and dealing and working with current stuff right now. And your back burners are the things that are running automatically, slickly. We don't have to worry about them. Make sense? Now, just so you know, if you know about brain research, that's not where things are happening in the brain, okay? Don't go literal on me about this. It's kind of a general concept. So one of our goals with handwriting is to get the process to move from the front burners where we're actually thinking about it and working on it to the back burners where it's running automatically with no problem. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, so a bunch of you are taking notes right now. I'm pretty sure you are not sitting there going, now I'm going to form an H. What does the H look like? How do I make my hand do that? Because if you were doing that, you would have no idea what I'm saying, okay? Now think about our pre-K, our K, our 1, they are doing some of that, okay? They're going to write a letter or write a word or write a sentence, and part of their working memory is committed to forming the letters, going in the right direction, doing all the things so that the reader can understand what they're saying. They have to do that, you don't. I worked with a number of kids who were older who were still having to do that. So it's okay if a kindergartner is thinking about letter formation. She should be. It's not okay if a 15-year-old is thinking about letter formation, right? Because that kid has to write more sophisticated text, more text, and they got to process that piece. That's going to be hard on them. So these 3 skills, and this is actually in the vertical handout on the web, these 3 skills are called transcription skills. That is to say, handwriting and word processing, those are kind of one, spelling and mechanics. Those 3 skills come together and they are our transcription skills. They are not connected to intelligence. You can actually be the smartest kid in my class and have the worst handwriting and be a horrible speller. Doesn't always happen that way, totally possible. So they're not equated with intelligence. On the other hand, they can interfere with my ability to show you how smart I am on paper, okay? So let's pretend that I've got a class, and the class is these women and men right here, and all of them have pretty much the same IQ, okay? Now, some of them at this table, they're thinking the person next to me is not as smart as I am, but just for right now, okay, we all have the same intelligence. And I give them a prompt. I'm going to ask them to write on a topic, and I give them the same amount of time. I give them a sharp pencil. They've got all the supplies. Everything's fair. I keep the room quiet. Okay. And they write. And then I ask my friend here to take them home, not the kids, but the papers, okay, and spell check, type them up, spell check, fix the handwriting, do all of the things so that my 2 friends here, these are my 2 dyslexic kids. They are struggling with handwriting. They are struggling with spelling, but they still have the same IQ as everybody else at the table. Okay, they have these 2 little deficits. So my friend here goes home and she types them and she spell checks them. That way I can't tell that these kids have these deficits. Okay, I won't be judgy. I'm gonna look at the content. But here's the problem. While they were writing, they were using some of their working memory to spell and to handwrite. So their content isn't as good. They don't have as good sentences. They don't have as good organization. They get bumped for these things, even though my friend over here has fixed them. Okay, that's that punch in the gut in terms of working memory with these kids who struggle with handwriting and spelling. Everybody okay? Is that okay? So skills required for handwriting. The planning to form letters. So I know what a W looks like. I've got to plan and organize my body, the paper, everything to get that letter done. One of my favorite things about handwriting is assessment of space requirements. So I would do a whole workshop with kids, I'm kind of making a joke now, about what those red lines are. They're called margins, and you stop writing when you hit the back one, right? Okay, so not necessarily if you're a kid, but you're supposed to. Also, I love kids who skip the top 4 or 5 lines just for fun. Well, I thought it was the right thing to do. It wasn't. You're killing trees and you're annoying me, and your letters are so big anyway that means you only have room for about 4 letters on your page. Then we gotta have another piece of paper. That's exhausting. Okay, so all kinds of space issues. Also, you'll see kids who are like, all right, I have the word anti-disestablishmentarianism. I've got about 1.5 inches at the end of the line. It'll fit. No, it will not fit. So what do? You like jumble up your letters, blah, blah, blah. Or I just had this happen the other day. This kid, he's an older kid. He was writing the word enthusiasm, and his spelling's actually okay. This was not a problem. So he assessed he leveled, he's like, this is gonna make it. And this all happens in like a millisecond. This isn't like, I'm gonna measure and what have you. This is not a carpenter, okay? So he's writing enthusiasm. He's starting to approach, and you can tell from his face, he knows he's not gonna make it. Okay, we have a problem. So he hyphenates, and the best thing about his hyphenation is he just hyphenates the M. Right? Like, what are you doing? Okay, so there's this floating M on the next line. That doesn't look good. Kids will do that with words like cat. C-A, uh-oh, I know I'm not supposed to write past the margin. T. Okay, so assessment of spacing requirements, and that's tricky. That really can be a lot. Also, you know kids who, a lot of you are K1, kids who have difficulty with creating enough space between words so you can tell there's a word break, right? I've actually had kids who will draw lines between words. It's like a seek and find to find words. And they're just not, they haven't figured out how to kind of cluster, what have you. So one of the advantages of Cursive, we'll talk about that in a little while, because that's going to force the clustering, right? So you can see that spacing. But that spacing thing can be an issue as well. Excuse me. Incoming visual and touch sensory information. There's a lot coming into your body about how much pressure am I putting on the paper? How does the pencil feel in the hand? How is it going to feel when it's moving across? There's a lot going on there that I've got to process and deal with. All right? Okay, here's the big term of the morning. I'm going to be super simplistic about this for our goals, but there's something called the phonological orthographic loop. This is not as complicated as it sounds for those of you who haven't talked about this. So if you are teaching, those of you who are K1, which is like 2/3 of you, you are already doing phonological awareness. If you aren't, I'm just going to tell you should be. Okay, intent. Okay, so phonology is just the study of the sound system. That's all it really is. Orthography is the written letters, the spelling system, what have you. So when you talk about phonology to orthography, you're talking about something like phonographic mapping, or you're talking about something like where I say a word, I sound it out, and then I create the letters and write it. Everybody okay? That's all that really is. There's more to it, but that's good for our purposes. All right. Now you're looking at the loop. Now that I've seen the word, okay, I also have to be able to create sound out of it and read the word and process the word and know what the word is. So that's this loop. So I've got to work on that when I'm creating this handwriting. If I'm just creating a C, not as big a deal. If I am spelling out the word cat, that's what's happening, okay? I've got to sound it out. It's all happening pretty fast, okay? But I have to sound it out in my head. I have to form the letters to create that sound system in writing, and then it loops back around. All right, motor skills. I've got to have planning movements. I've got controlling movements during production. Some of you teachers who teach 5-year-olds, you're like, my kids have no control, so that's not on their checklist. And executing the writing. So we talk a lot about reading fluency. I know you've been to workshops about reading fluency. Writing fluency is a thing too. So I want to be accurate, but I also want to be comfortable and fast enough that when I'm writing, I can keep track of and hold on to my ideas, that I've got to be able to do that. So if I'm stopping, I've seen kids with gorgeous handwriting, but it's like a letter every 15 minutes. Okay, so that's not, it may be pretty, but it is not an effective way of communicating. That's not going to work for the long haul. It might work for the C sheet when I'm in kindergarten, but it's not going to work when you give me 30 minutes to write 2 paragraphs when I'm older. That's just not going to happen. Automaticity of letter writing is the single best predictor of length and quality of written composition in the primary years. Number 1. So if you can test a kid's automaticity, if you can get a sense that the kid is forming letters accurately and rapidly, that's not just length, that's how good the writing is. Number 1 predictor. In 2016, Virginia Berninger, who's one of the big handwriting researchers in the country, she just retired to Baltimore last year before. She took 4 classes of kids, 2nd graders, out in Washington State. And 2 of the classes, they embedded handwriting instruction into their phonics curriculum. 2 of the classes, they did not. They did some handwriting, kind of incidentally, what have you, but it was not that embedded, intensive work with handwriting. They did pre and post, and they did assessments and what have you. These are full classes, like 20, 25 kids, whatever. And at the end of the assessment, they tested all the language skills, and here's what they found. All of the kids, both groups, they made some reading gains. I mean, they're in a good phonics program, what have you. That's happening. They made some spelling gains. There were exceptions. There always are in your assessments, but overall, there was growth. But what they found in the kids who had the handwriting embedded into the instruction is, not only did the handwriting speed go up, which you would expect, that's kind of a duh, right? Their reading and spelling scores increased more than the kids who didn't have the embedded handwriting instruction. So a problem is this. I'm really not anti-state standards. What I wish is that there would be a 20-page preface at the beginning of that says, here are all the foundational skills we need to get your kid to mainstream third grade level or kindergarten level or whatever it might be. And there's some post-it notes and some little things in the back, but not that kind of intensive awareness of the foundational skills. So one of the reasons that we're kind of having a backlash and states are getting excited about handwriting is the standards took handwriting pretty much off. I mean, it's mentioned in first grade, there's a little bit, okay? But not really a significant piece of our instruction. So teachers and principals and administrators, they're saying, oh my gosh, a kindergarten teacher's saying, I don't have enough time to teach the curriculum. I'm having, trouble in between these things. I've got to get the math in the morning. Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Handwriting and on the standards, let's cross it off. There's 15 or 20 minutes, I just got you. Problem being that if you look at the writing standards, things like we're writing sentences, things like we're writing paragraphs, they all depend on your ability to form letters effectively and comfortably. So that's that foundational skill that isn't given kind of street cred on the standards, okay, but is required of the things that you're doing on the standards. Everybody okay so far? Okay. So this piece, remember what I'm telling you guys, it doesn't just affect this handwriting embedded. It doesn't just affect writing fluency. It affects their reading scores and it affects their spelling scores. Okay, and reading scores sounds kind of counterintuitive, but when you're forming letters, you are creating language. You are working that language cycle. Learning to form letters by hand improves perception of letters and contributes to better reading and spelling. Writing is essential for developing the networks involved in letter processing. So if I ask you guys to draw a boat, and I ask you folks over here to form letters, you're going to be activating some places in the brain that you guys are not activating, okay? Because you're actually forming language components. You guys are drawing a picture or something. Learning to write and perceive letters during early childhood may affect learning to spell and read words during middle childhood. So we're gonna have some long-term effects. One of the bummers for kindergarten, first grade, second grade teachers is you guys are teaching them skills that have the biggest impact later on after they're out of your classrooms. And they're not gonna come back and say, thank you so much for teaching me how to write handwriting well. They're just not. But you are giving them a skill, and I'll tell you where they will do it. When they're 25 and they're teachers and they're in workshops with me, they say, I had this woman, Miss Smith, and she saved me. She taught me all. They remember back then, but they're gonna run in as third graders and say, wow, when I write an essay, you make it easier. But you do. That's what's happening when you can help these kids automatize their handwriting. Okay, so I am pro word processing as well. That is not our goal today, but I didn't want you guys to think that that's not on our table. It is. The argument that the researchers right now are making is that kids should be hybrid writers. They should be Priuses. So they need to be good word processors, and they also need to be good handwriters, okay? And that's the piece. So when I listen to administrators sometimes, and they say things like, well, handwriting isn't in the standards, we're a techie generation anyway, we're gonna give the kids iPads, blah, blah, blah. I'm not anti-tech, that's fine, except when you have kids keyboarding, that does not move reading, writing, spelling skills at the level that we're talking about with this. These younger kids on up, they need to be doing the handwriting piece. Questions, problems so far? One of the neat things about being videoed is nobody wants to ask a question. Okay, so that's fine. It's not quite as much fun, but it's okay. So I'm not gonna go through this all with you, but it's in your slideshow, and it's some of the sort of standards and reasons for doing things. I do wanna core anchor you in this though. In order to cement a stroke, cursive, manuscript, whatever, you need at least 2 years of instruction. So I want you to think about what you're doing in your own schools or private practice or wherever you are. Well, this is you all are all in schools. What you're doing in your schools, think about whether that's the way things are set up. And if not, you've got a problem and you want to rethink that. So here's what happens all the time. Kids are doing manuscript in kindergarten, first grade, and most of second. They introduce cursive sometime in second grade or early third grade. They do it for a while, and that's it. So you end up with 2.5 years of manuscript, and you end up with 3 months or 6 months, or if you're lucky, 9 months of cursive, okay? And then the fourth grade teachers want to know why everybody reverts back to print. So you walk into a fourth grade classroom, and the teacher's working on note taking. We've got some notes, and that's fine. Fourth graders, they're ready for that. Okay, so we've got, the little section on life science, and we have some notes up. Your only goal as a kid, there's only one goal, is to not be the last person copying those notes. Okay, what's true? You don't want to be like, oh, everybody, Mary's going to be done in just a minute, okay? And you're really nice about it while you devastate Mary and make sure she never has a boyfriend, okay? So as you're thinking about that, all right, the revert thing, when people are like, well, I don't see the point of cursive because they revert. You didn't give them long enough to learn how to do that piece correctly. So there is no research that says that mainstream kids should do cursive over print or print over cursive. There just isn't for mainstream kids. There's a significant amount of research that our strugglers are going to benefit from cursive over manuscript. Okay, but I'm very into we're into science of reading mode now, we're into research mode now. I will tell you research that goes against what I think. And there is not research. It's not they found research that says it's up in the air. They really just haven't done enough research to look at mainstream kids and say, does this not? But LD kids, strugglers, there's a lot of research. So the argument would be, we want to do cursive with everybody anyway, because we know that there's really no pain for our mainstream kids, and we're going to pull in our strugglers, which could be as much as 20% of our population. Everybody okay so far? Okay, so I just want to dispel one myth. Most of you are in schools where, at least in kindergarten and first grade, manuscripts are being taught. That's fine, I'm not really against that. And then you transition sometime in second grade, that's okay, as long as you're carrying it over for 2 years. Think about what that means for your instruction, okay? You know, I would argue that if I were the principal of a school right now, I would say my third graders are all writing in cursive and they're required, period. We're not giving them choices after they've learned for 2 months, because they're gonna revert back to the one they've been doing for 2 years, okay? Even if they're doing the weird capital letters in the middle of words and their print looks like chaos and blah, blah, blah. They've just done it more, okay? So I would argue that, but what I want to dispel in you guys, a myth I want you to kind of get rid of is the idea that cursive is harder, more challenging, the more advanced skill. We do it with older kids a lot, and I would tell the kids it's a more advanced skill. We're going to do the big kid stuff. And they're actually all about that. Oh, we're ready for cursive now? They think they're in rocket science, okay? So that's awesome, but there's no research that says cursive's harder than print. Some people would argue that you do print first because you're learning reading in print letters. I got that, but I can tell you that at the schools across the country that work with dyslexic kids, an enormous number of them have cursive starting in first grade. No problem, no glitch. The entire continent of Europe, everyone writes in cursive from first grade. The Montessori folks, cursive, first grade. Catholic nuns, cursive, first grade. True, funny, true. Okay, occupational therapists, they'll tell you 4-year-olds should write in capital print because of the large strokes or whatever, but after that, they are super pro-cursive. So what I want you to do, I'm not telling you to rewrite your curriculum, I am telling you this. I don't want you to be the second grade teacher who says, well, we can't start cursive when we were planning to because their print isn't good enough. I used to take kids with the worst print you've ever seen, and within 2 weeks, we'd have them writing in cursive that was more legible than anything in print because it's so much easier for those struggling kids. So I just don't want you to feel like you have to perfect. It's not a precursor. If you're a math teacher, you know you have to have addition before you can do multiplication, okay? They work hand in hand. That makes sense to me. You do not have to have good manuscript to be a good cursive writer. In grades 4 to 6, handwriting fluency still accounts for 42% of the variability in the quality of children's writing. How well they write, how comfortably they write, etc. Students' handwriting speed continues to increase at least until grade 9. So Graham tested that 9th graders were writing more words per minute than their 8th grade peers. Now you may be wondering about those 10th graders. He didn't test them. I'll bet they're writing faster, but we don't know because he didn't go past 9th grade. I think the 9th grade thing is shocking. They're in high school and they are still speeding up this process. And that, by the way, is manuscript, cursive, whatever they're doing. I'm not in the cursive manuscript mode. This bottom one, if you haven't seen this work, Google it, it's really interesting. They've done 3 studies now at colleges. And what they do is they take a professor lectures to a class. They give half the class laptops, half the class pen and paper, pencil and paper, whatever, take notes, okay? And they've done 3 things with those. One is they collected the notes. And what they found in the research is the keyboard notes are more accurate. So if I missed class, I want your notes. I don't want your notes. That said, then they tested the kids' knowledge 3 hours later and 3 days later. Handwriting kids won, hands down, both groups. And what they think's happening is you guys are acting as secretaries or stenographers. You're recording the information. You may or may not be processing or understanding it while you're recording it. You guys are summarizing, making connections. You're not writing anything down that you already knew. You are studying the content as you write. Okay, that's what's happening with you guys. So there are some Harvard professors who are not allowing kids to bring computers into their classrooms because of this research. And they're not anti-IEP. If you needed a laptop, that would be different. But just sort of standard kids coming in, they are requiring them to work by hand. So I had 2 former students at major universities. Both of them, this is true, both of them were in intro classes. One of those classes with a 1,200-page textbook, you know, and the print's about this big, and you're gonna have a little section test, and it's all this stuff to memorize. And they were mildly struggling, not a big deal. But they're both struggling in this class, okay? 2 different classes with the same kind of thing, intro to blank. And they both reached out to me. They had papers they were working on. They said, Van Cleave, you gave us an article about this thing about handwriting. I gave them an article about this. The New York Times wrote a little article, and I just gave it to them. I said, read this, take a look at it, see what you think, okay? So now one of the kids had another problem, and that problem was that he had chosen a major as a first-year student at college, and that major was fraternity. Do you all know that major? Little problem, okay, like, are we going to class? Because you're not going to do well in the material if you don't attend, okay? That's, you know. But they said, you know, what do you think about my handwriting notes? Because I've been taking my laptop in. Do you think that would be better? And I said, look, this is a study. We have not tried this, you and me, but it can't hurt. Why don't you go in and do handwriting for the next section of notes, take the next test, blah, blah, blah. Their scores both went up by about a grade level. They were kind of the low B range after that, feeling good. One of them reached out and said, look, this happened, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I started handwriting. I definitely could feel myself thinking about what I was writing, but I also, when I put my computer away, I went ahead and put my phone away too. So he wasn't texting his girlfriend, he wasn't on his, he wasn't doing all the social media thing too. And it turns out, I don't have a study on this, but I think you're gonna trust me, when you focus on content, you learn it better. Okay, and I'm guessing that the intro to blank is not as interesting as texting with your girlfriend. That's my guess. Again, I don't have studies on that, but I would think that, I don't think anybody's gonna be disagreeing with me about that. So I think this is really compelling, interesting research. And think about it. This is all in the last, 7 years. These kids are tech babies. I had a computer lab for the first time in 8th grade. I'm not a tech baby, not at the core. These kids, all that tech was in place really, that we're using and thinking about now. So something to think about as we're looking at this handwriting piece in the long term. 39% of teachers said their students' handwriting was adequate. Here's the scary one. Disappointingly, 12% believe they receive adequate preparation to teach handwriting in their college education courses. So I've got 90% teaching it, 12% think they're armed to do it. Now that doesn't mean some of these people didn't have PD afterwards. I love doing handwriting workshops with teachers because it fills a gap. There are a lot of teachers out there who are saying, okay, it's handwriting worksheet time. I'm gonna go refill my coffee, here's your practice sheet, do this. And that's gonna be a problem. And I'm not saying you don't have time where you refill your coffee or you eat your apple, I got that. Not during handwriting instruction, there's no way. That's a hands-on, exhausting part of instruction. But if you don't know how to teach it, it isn't. That's where, and I don't think these worksheet teachers are lazy. I think these worksheet teachers don't know how to do the instruction. So they're backing off. They're not going to try to do something where they know they're going to fail. You do not want to fail in front of 25 5-year-olds. That is not a good thing. You can go to your local carpet store and get those carpet squares. They're great, and you just, on your fingers. And they're like $1 each, or if you tell the carpet folks that you're a teacher, they'll probably give them to you. It's just not going to cost you that much. Those squares are all free from the carpet companies. Sand trays, little lap boards. My friend Arlene Sunday up in Minnesota uses finger paint in a Ziploc bag, which is great, kind of fun. There's something called brain freeze that Kendor does, which is it's the stuff that's inside clean diapers, and you wet it and it makes gloppy whatever, and then you leave it out, it'll dry out to crystals again. It's absolutely disgusting, but the kids love it. So they're all like, oh, let's do brain freeze. Okay, so lots of different things that you can use and pull from. I would have a couple of different kinds in your classroom to rely on different things, okay? And you're looking at that motor memory, you're practicing. Except for the lap board, everything I just said is with your fingers, okay? I also, if you've got cinder block walls, that's a great service. You get kids to go up to the cinder block wall, and it's bumpy, but it's soft. It's not gonna hurt them, right? That's great. I love vertical surface writing, like if you've got a whiteboard, clear it off, do a rotation, like a volleyball rotation, and you have a group that's up there doing that when they're practicing letters. Get them like really working on motor flow and body. The formations of the letters are not the hard part. The hard part is the grip, the paper position, body motion, those kinds of things. If I had a 17-year-old who had never learned cursive, I could teach him the formations in a week. Not a problem at all. Fixing his bad grip would take a lot longer. I've done it, but it is not easy. And often the 17-year-old, I'm at the point where it's like, okay, word processing level, we're probably not going to mess with this. But they've got some grips. You look at the grip and you're like, how is that even physically possible? Like, what do you do to do that? Like, you know. So, everybody get so far? All right. With 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, I would tend to be in a mode where I walk around and kind of check their grips. I'm not just going to give everybody a pencil grip. I'm going to give pencil grips to the kids who need them. I am in classrooms all the time helping teachers work with handwriting. I have not seen kids feel bad because they're one of the kids that needs a grip. I just don't think that's a stigma. There are other stigmas, but that's just not a big deal. They do have trouble keeping up with them, and there's some maintenance stuff going on there, but overall I think we're in a relatively good shape with that. And some of this is kind of experimentation. So you give them a grip, doesn't work super well for the kid's hand, he's kind of contradicting it or going over it, or he pulls it up the pencil, whatever, you try a different grip. And it's not going to be 25 kids. You can have a few of your kids, maybe 5 of your kids that you're going to be working on this with, or 7 of your kids. So it's not you walking and go, oh my gosh, I got 25. No. And you're going to know which 7 kids those are. So when you're walking around the room, you're going to be checking them. I've got one classroom, actually, when they do handwriting instruction, they're in certain desks. She's got the grip kids kind of together. So she walks around, she makes sure everybody's on, and then she can come back and kind of do a mini lesson, if you will, and work a little bit on the grip and be more aware of that. One tip I want to give you guys as we're going to do a little bit with grip right now, but one tip I want to give you guys is when you go to other writing pieces in your classroom, like let's say you're doing some spelling drills, or you're going to do a little sentence composing or something like that, don't forget to get them in the right grips and start them well. I've got some teachers in one of the schools where I consult. I'm on a striving readers grant, but in Montana with 3 schools, and I go in 2 days a month to consult with them. And one of the teachers, she's amazing. She's one of the best teachers in the building, but she wasn't thinking about doing what we do in handwriting. When she goes to spelling, she didn't even mention the grip and those kinds of things. And I said that to her, and she's like, oh, I'm so focused on, let's get the spelling, blah, blah, blah. It takes her 30 seconds to get them ready. They're in the right grips, and then they're practicing that piece for the other components of writing. All right, this is a cursive position because her paper's at 45 degrees. And we're going to talk about paper position, but everything else is appropriate for print as well, except for the paper slant is a little too much for print. So we are supposed to be upright, arms above the table enough. You don't want a kid like this because you can't control them. You also, guys, some of you are teaching remedially, so you're teaching across grades and you may be doing pull-out. Be careful with desk height and chair height, because if you're working with a kindergartner and then the next hour you're working with a 5th grader, the chairs aren't going to work. You're going to have to do some adjusting. You do not want kids' feet dangling, because they need to anchor. Now, if they're just moving around, attention issues, I'm not worried about that. I'm not saying control them. I'm saying if their feet are above the floor, just dangling, there's nothing for them to anchor their body when they're trying to write, okay? So you want to make, you could put a pillow under their backsides if they're too low to the table. You can put a dictionary or a phone book underneath their feet. I mean, there are things you can do, but you kind of want to watch that. So usually in kindergarten, you got a bunch of kindergarten desks. They're all relatively similar in size, not perfect, but relatively it'll all work out. And I'm going to tell you a super scary story from 2016 in a minute too. Anyway, so a decent amount of that happened. Kids were trained, what have you. You are hardwired to use the hand you use unless you were switched. So your brain, this is not about, your preference is left-handed. We'd rather you prefer right. That's not going to happen, okay? So, and I think, I don't have research on this, but I think it's kind of on a spectrum. So some of you are super, super right or super, super left, and some of you are kind of not ambidextrous, that's not what I'm talking about, but closer to the middle. You're the kind of person where if you broke your hand or something, you had to use your other hand, you could probably get by. It wouldn't be pretty, but you could get by. I have also seen kids who break an arm and they say, I cannot even open the door. I'm completely non-functional. Okay, so those are the kids who are completely, and they've got a posse behind them holding their books and carrying things and getting their lunch trays and whatever. They also tend to be coincidentally the popular kids, right? Okay, so they got this other type. So as you're looking at that frame, guys, your hand is determined. Sometimes with strugglers, they take longer to determine a hand. I don't mean they're ambidextrous. One of the actual early signs of a language-based learning difficulty is difficulty choosing a dominant hand. So and I just was talking to a teacher yesterday about this. A kid who is kind of, I think, well, it's this point of the year, it's February, and he's kindergarten, and he's not trying to be annoying, he's not being a jerk, and he kind of switches around hands while he's writing. She's done some of the other tests, like one of the tests you can do is drop something on the floor, see what hand he picks it up with. That seems to be mixed too. And I am not a diagnostician, nor would I diagnose dyslexia off of that. But I would have some red flags, and I would say, you know what? And I asked her if he's spelling well. No. So there was another red flag. So I'm going to get into one. And he's verbally super sharp. She says he talks circles around a bunch of other kids in the classroom. So I've got a whole little group of red flags. I'm not diagnosing, but I am saying we're going to get some more information on this, right? We're not just going to let this go, because we all know that early diagnosis is the key to helping some of these problems before they become major problems later on. And you can actually remediate a younger kid to pretty much comfortable level in a lot of, not all, but in a lot of situations, if you catch them early enough so they're not constantly struggling throughout the rest of schooling. Okay? So, and remember, I want you to do both eyes, because you're going to have kids that have the other eye. Okay? So don't just do it for yours, do it for both. Hold the tube out and up and look through it with both eyes. Get an object you're focused on. Close your left eye. If you can still see the object, you are right eye dominant because you're seeing it with your right eye. Now, open your left eye. Get it where you can see it with both eyes again. Close your right eye. If you can still see the object, you are left eye dominant. Okay, now take the paper. On the back, put I, that's E-Y-E-I, and write which eye you are. In Oklahoma, you can actually Google this. In Oklahoma in 2016, a kindergarten teacher told a little girl who was left-handed if she did not switch hands, she would go to the bad place. But she used the bad place word, which I'm not going to use because we're being videoed. Everybody with me so far? It ends in double L. Everybody okay? All right, so the little girl went, and she said, if you don't switch, you're going there. The little girl went home and said, Mommy, I'm going to that place, okay? So the teacher was fired, but just what I want you to realize is, this is 2016, folks. This is, I'm not blaming any nuns. They did what they thought was right, but that was the 1960s. They're over that, or the 1970s, okay? They figured out that this is not going to be the game changer in terms of which place you're going. There's so many other ways to assess that, okay? Are you a serial killer? Well, then let's not go there, okay? So as you're thinking about that, though, guys, you want to be very careful that you are not in an environment where kids are being switched. Because this is a hardwired thing. Okay, so we're going to do something kind of cool. I'm going to work on grip with you. So you need to put your pencil, if you will, put your pencil down with the point facing your stomach. You're going to go up with your thumb and your pointer and grasp it with just those two. See what I'm doing? Don't be all like this. It won't work. You have to come up from the bottom and grab it here. Grab it firmly with those two, flip it, and it'll be in the right position. That's called pinch and flip. And it's how I get huge groups of kids to hold their pencils right all at once. You have to train them. The first day or 2 days is chaos. But folks, your kids take a month to line up for a fire drill, right? Okay, so this is, it takes some time to do the routines. Okay, so I'm putting it down. Try it again. Put it down. Pinch, grab it tightly, flip it. And you will be in the right position because your middle finger is not supposed to be pushing on the pen like this. That's what I do when I write, actually. You're supposed to be under here like this as a bridge. Everybody see the difference? There are only about 40,000 pictures of this on the web. This is the standard triangular grip. I did not invent this, it's just kind of the normal grip. But the pinch and flip is a cool way to get a large group of kids into the right position. Everybody okay so far? Pinch, flip. Okay, now here's your challenge. Do that with your non-dominant hand. Okay, so put it down. Well, you need to be able to do this, folks, because you have lefties in your room, you have righties in your room, okay? So and you don't want to walk up to a righty and say, do it opposite from me. That's not good. So what I do when I'm doing this grip thing is I have a pencil or a pen in both hands, and I walk around, I'm like, oh, you're a lefty, and I show people, right? I'm modeling this piece for them so they can really see what's going on. They need to see it in their style. Or I can say, lefties, don't look for a minute, and I show them righty, and then I say righties, don't look for a minute, and I show them lefty, but show them both. Don't just say do it the mirror of me. But, if you are a writer, so the last time I wrote, I had to write a graduate exam by hand. They would not let me bring a computer in, and I wrote in those blue books, and it was awful. My hand hurt for 10 days, and I had it wasn't quite bleeding, but it was like that part of my finger, because I don't hold my pencil right. And I bought a super fancy pen to help. It only helped minimally. Okay, so as you're thinking about this, folks, the other unusual grips, this isn't about, oh, this is my style. This grip was not created to make everybody be uniform. This grip was created because it reduces fatigue and it reduces pain. So when you have kids who are holding pencils in unusual ways, I had one like this. I can show you a video of it. It's insane. Okay? That kid, his actually didn't hurt, but if you time him, he is way lower than he was at. This is in 10th grade, I saw this. Okay? He's right. You wouldn't know if you teach K1 that he's writing slower than other 10th graders because you don't have a comparative base because it looks pretty fluent. It's slower. He's a bright kid. He's actually the one majoring in fraternity right now. Okay, so he's a bright kid. He's making some poor choices. Anyway, so as you're thinking about that, folks, if you can get this going, I can fix a grip in an 18-year-old. It's super hard, not always likely to be done, not always worth it. But my little kids, I had a second grade teacher the other day say, well, it's too late. It's not. It's harder, but it's not too late. I can walk up to a middle school kid with a bad grip. In these schools I'm consulting in Montana, I can walk up and say, hey, lean down, and I'm up there so much they all kind of know me and expect me to be there, and say, does it hurt when you write? The answer is always yes. It is always yes, it hurts when I write. And these 8th graders, they're writing a whole lot more than your kindergarten and first graders are. Not dissing you at all, but you are getting them ready to do a whole lot more writing than a row of A's or a couple sentences or what have you. Or paragraphs by the end for first graders. If I'm right-handed, 15% this way for manuscript. If I'm left-handed, 15% this way. Okay, why? Because I want to be able to go like this. If I do this, I have to do this. Everybody okay? It totally makes sense, and I explain to 5-year-olds. They have to understand why we're doing it. That doesn't mean they're going to naturally do it easily. You're going to have to do some adjusting, but they do need to understand why. Okay, and I get kids to explain to me, now why do I want you to tilt your paper? And 5-year-olds can talk through this. What's more comfortable for my arm this way? Good thing to say. And they can't pronounce comfortable well, so it's fun to listen to. Okay, some lefties have been taught to like the righties, and they have to do this. There's all kinds of muscle fatigue. Or they do this or this, and they do the famous left-hand hook. You see right-hand hooks, they're not as often. The left-hand hook's trying to get out of the way of the writing and all this stuff. My mentor, Diana King, who I mentioned at the beginning of this workshop, she calls that dysteachia. Okay, so that's a right-handed teacher who is teaching left-handed kids like right-handed kids. Okay, not a good thing to do. And this is unusual, actually. Only 2 in this room. There are more left-handed people in the world. We just have a lower percentage in here. I want to use gross motor because I can tell you what won't tire out. My arm muscles. What tires out is my hand muscles. And you have to use your hand for writing, don't get me wrong, but the more you can rely on your arm, the better off you are. Okay, the more I can use that arm, the better off I am. Now, one of the things you don't want to do in your classroom is when a kid is writing with something like this, you don't want to go, ooh, like the woman up here did, because that's emotionally scarring, and the kid will need therapy, okay? So, all right. Okay. So, I'm just being playful. Do be careful. They're going to be in the minority, but they're cool. This is an interesting thing. We got this other thing going on, and just be careful because there was a whole long time in the history of our education where they're at the broken desk in the back and all this stuff. Okay, all right. So here's where we get into the eye thing. If I am right hand, left eye, which a bunch of you were, probably too many, but around 10 of you were. Okay, my hand is going this way, but my eye over here is dragging this way. So what you end up with is less slant. You may even end up with a slantless alphabet. So it's going to look something like this. Now, my 2 lefties in the room, they're both cross-dominant. So they have left hand, right eye. Same thing happens in reverse. If they're tilting the paper the way I told them to. They may not be left-handed teachers. They have different slants because they've been taught differently. But if I'm doing this with kids the right way, so their hand is going to go this way, but their eye over here is going to drag them this way. So they are liable to do something very similar to this. Questions? So here's the point, if you will. If the kids have a consistent slant in their writing, leave it alone. You are not looking for the same degree of slant in all kids. You are looking for the kids to juggle eye and hand and figure out the slant that works for them. Now, you also have inconsistent slants. That is bad. We're going to work on that. And you will see, I've seen a ton of kids like this who will do something like this. Okay, I can tell you that in sentence form looks awful. It's difficult to read, it doesn't look mature, blah, blah, blah. And there's some things you can do. That's kind of a rabbit hole for a 90-minute workshop, but there's some things you can do to work on consistent slant. But if they've got a consistent slant, if one kid's got this slant, and next to her a kid has this slant, so be it. So this is T.C.C.C. Other places in the handout explains what that is, but I'm gonna tell you what it means right now. It's trace, copy, cover, closed. So if you've got a handwriting curriculum in your school, you can use what we're about to do with your curriculum. People do it all the time. They take one of the major published curricula, and they take what I just did and they go embed it. So I'm not telling you have to teach Diana's approach to do this. I'm telling you that this will work with whatever approach you're doing. So the first thing we're going to do is trace. And what we're going to do when we trace is we're going to name the letter out loud as we go. We're going to put our pencil on our ready position point, and we're going to go C. Everybody? C. C. We're just going to do 3. 3 is enough for today. C. Good. So you are tracing. The research on tracing is not great. Okay? If you don't actually form letters without the tracing guidelines, you're not doing much. So tracing is a bridge step just to kind of figure out what we're doing as we head into creating our own. Okay? I'm fine with tracing. It's fine if your system uses it. It's just that's not our end goal. Okay? All right. The next form is copy. So here are our letters for copying. We're going to go down to the starting point, and again, we're going to name the letter out loud. Here we go. C, C, C. Okay, so now what we're going to do is this. The next type is cover. So we're going to cover our C's, and you may not have paper to do this, I understand, but kind of fake it or put your hand over it or something. The whole idea behind this is your body now should be ready to form the C's, okay? This is not completely a motor skill, but it's mostly a motor skill. So my hand now knows how to form the C. So without any visual reminders, I'm going to form 3 C's. And don't forget, we're going to say them out loud. Here we go. C, C, C. Everybody okay? And they should look relatively good. We okay? All right. A tip here. So why am I saying them out loud? I am forming them. I am seeing them. I am saying them. I am hearing them. The only thing I'm not doing is smelling and tasting them. And if you want to lick your C sheet, I guess you can, okay? So that's super weird. So, and I explain to the kids why we're doing it. I explain it just like I just did to you guys. The first few times, they'll say, this is really hard, I can't do this. They'll be fine, okay? We do this with majorly dyslexic kids. It's okay. So we're activating senses to cement the learning. So you walk them through it. Do it. And you could have the belt line and the midline and all those different lingo. That's great. You want to do the grass on in the little blue sky. All of that stuff is fine. I have no problem with any of that. But you're saying go up to the midline, blah, blah, blah. They are not. It's too much language. They're trying to form the C. You're directing them. I can also tell you guys this. You probably figured out I'm pretty type A and high energy. When I do handwriting, I am super low-key and calm. You'd be kind of like, is William okay? All right? It's a very calm thing. We don't want them clenched. We don't want them to stop breathing, which they'll kind of do. We don't want any of that. It's a very calm thing. A lot of teachers, when they're doing the practice, they play music. I'm not super into music in classrooms, but music without lyrics for this kind of thing is great. I've got a second grade teacher who plays Mozart every day during this, and you walk in and it's kind of a very calm, cool environment. I don't have any research on playing music during instruction. Actually, there was some data about 15, 20 years ago about playing classical music, but this is just kind of white noise, calms them down, gets them in their groove. I'm totally all about that. I think that's great. All right, I would argue in favor of warm-up strokes. I've given you some samples for Manuscript. The idea is that we're warming up the hand for the kinds of motion we're going to need to make the letters. So you might look at one of these and go, what is that? Well, it turns into, it's a part we use for a letter. I just want to instruct you on one thing. The top one we call windshield wipers or window wipers or something. When I do that one with kids, it's hard actually. When I do this with teachers, about half of them don't do it right at first, okay? And what you want to do is you're pivoting from your elbow. So what I'll do with kids very gently is I'll just hold on to their wrist while they go across and they can feel the difference. We're trying to work on the gross motor, the stuff that doesn't fatigue. And if you're doing it all with this, you've got a problem with that. You're not activating that. So, and everybody's fine with it. Teachers are even fine with it, what have you. But just like working on that. For whatever reason, when I do this in workshops, teachers can see it in their colleagues. They have trouble, and I'm not being sarcastic at all. They can't see their own hand doing it, but they can look over and see the hand doing it in somebody else. So, you can have a neighbor look at it, what have you, but you're trying that window wipers is about activating gross motor. And so when we're doing this stuff, still, you got some fine motor. I got to do this, right? I get it. But I've also got to move across the page. I don't want to do that with my hand. That's going to wear me out. So I'm coming into 3rd grade or 2nd grade and I'm teaching cursive. Theoretically, mainstream kids, they know their ABCs. Okay, they've got their letters. If they don't, that's a struggling kid who's got a different sound. Okay, that's not everybody, but a 2nd grader typically knows the letters of the alphabet in print. Okay, so I don't really have to worry about a sequence with 2nd graders because they've had all the letters. I know a bunch of your kindergarten, we'll get there in a minute. Everybody see what I do with 2nd grade? So I would go with totally by stroke cluster. So what I've done here is given you a sample. So look down here at the bottom. A, C, D, G, and Q are what we call, in my young background, we call them overstroke letters. They all start this way. So I would learn them together as a motor stroke that has this same practice. Clustering by family is not how they're introducing their letters. So I'm going to make something up right now. I'm going to pretend that my curriculum introduces T first. That's the first letter, and we say T. We don't say ta. T is clearly a tall letter. Now, most of the curricula say we're going to learn a vowel now because we want to get so we can read some words quickly. I'm into that. Let's apply what we're doing, okay? So our next letter is going to be A. That tends to be the first vowel people learn because it's common and it's relatively clean and straightforward, unlike A and I, which is confusing for, huge regions of the United States that pronounce them the same way. I won't be insulting to anybody in particular. Okay, so A isn't in the same motor family. I really can't associate them with stroke. T is down. A is going to be a 2 o'clock, swing around and finish. They're not associated. They're not the same family. I don't really know. Okay, now let's pretend my next letter is B, because B is formed like T. It is a top-down letter. Everybody see what I'm saying? Okay, so what I would do, if I were using your core curriculum and going through is, I would do a quick review of T. Why not review? Review is good. And then I would do the new letter that goes with the T and say, now we're going to do another one just like the T. It's also a top-down letter. So I sequence in families according to my sequence, or my phonics sequence. Everybody with me? Takes a little more legwork, but I've never heard a kindergarten teacher say we should never review. Advantages to cursive for struggling kids. Number 1, it cuts down on reversals. So folks, it's not just that cursive B looks different from cursive D. Everybody watch my fingers. It's that cursive B is an upstroke. Cursive D is an overstroke. It's how they're formed. Now, if you form print B and D correctly, they're formed differently too. But I got a decent number of kids who go straight down and they're saying, wonder which way I should go today. Okay, that's a problem. And then if you drop it below the line, you've got P and Q. You've got complete chaos, all right? So B and D, fewer reversals when you see this happen. So you'll see, like, former students of mine who struggle with a language-based learning difficulty, who made a lot of reversal errors, when they go to cursive, a lot of them, they'll just drop away, those reversal errors. That's 1, 2. And a proper lowercase alphabet, one that I would support, the letters start on the baseline. I've given you an A here. You've got a sheet full of them, though, those C's. Some of the curricula, like I said, they start at 2 o'clock for these letters. I've taken kids with pretty sloppy cursive, and I've said you have to start every single lowercase letter on the baseline. That cleans up a lot of the legibility. You'd be impressed. Older kids I'm talking about right now, but you'd be impressed. All right. Spelling is better reinforced in the mind if the continuous movement of cursive is used. We're going to skywrite right now. We're going to use 2 fingers because you always use 2 fingers for skywriting if you skywrite. I'm not a huge skywriting fan, but you want to do 2 fingers for skywriting. Everybody 2 fingers together. We're going to print the word the. Here we go. T-H-E. Now, in 1 second, we're going to do it in cursive. And what I want you to do is notice what's happening in your arm. Okay? Here we go. T-H-E. You are activating. You feel the flow? Okay? You are activating kinesthetic motor memory. Does it work in print? Yes. Does it work as well in print? No. Because you don't have that flow. You have disconnected, short, jerky movements to form print. So your body is learning the letters or the spelling. So when you ask a kid to write a word 3 times or 5 times, I'm actually in total support of that. I wouldn't do the 10 or 20. But if the kid has good handwriting and good grip and what have you, he's actually learning. His body is learning the correct motion. This is why invented spelling in its pure form is horrible. Where you just say, you know what? Let all spelling fly. We're just going to write for a few years. Because they write they, T-H-A-Y, 30,000 times, and then you try to fix it. Guess how many times they got to write it to undo it? 30,000. Okay? Now, I don't believe we're going in and nailing all spelling errors when kids are trying to compose. Okay? I'm not ridiculous about this, but I'm getting a lot of data. 17 of the 25 kids cannot spell they to serve their lives. That, or save their lives, excuse me. That is going on the spelling list Monday. I don't care what the curriculum says. Okay? So I'm going to use diagnostic information, and I'm going to work on those pieces. Okay? All right. It forces appropriate clustering. I mentioned this at the beginning. If you've got those print kids where you can't tell where one word ends and the next one begins, cursive actually fixes that. All the letters are touching, you're good to go. When you do handwriting practice in isolation, you want to name the letter. C, D, F, G. And C is a good example. You are not writing K, because C also says S. You are writing C. It's pronounced different ways in different words. Everybody okay with just the isolated handwriting? Okay. Now, if you look at one of the OG-based curricula, or one of the ones that has the structural literacy piece in it, if you're doing simultaneous oral spelling, which is what we've been doing, I would definitely do that for spelling dictation. I would do that in whatever curriculum you're doing. I would get SOS doing. You get 25 kids doing this in course. It's awesome. I've seen it done dozens and dozens of times. But I would probably go to sound. So let's say we're all going to write cat. You don't have to do this. I would do it this way. I would go k, a, t. I'm sounding it out. I'm still adding senses. I'm pronouncing. I'm listening to myself, so I'm adding 2 senses to the experience, okay? But I'm pronouncing it as it's said. When I have older kids, and we're doing multisyllabic words, I often do by syllable. We don't pronounce the letters, so it would be something like this. Com, bin, a, shun. And you know when that happens? When the kids start doing it. Those kids just kind of naturally start doing it, and I leave them alone. They are sounding out the structure. They are adding senses to the experience. Sometimes older kids, when we get into some of the complicated words, they'll go back to letters, because like you said, like inspiration, that is an IR or what have you, some of those things, that's okay. But with my younger kids, my foundational kids, if you're having them spell words, they can sound them out. This is a daily thing. It's like phonological awareness. You're going to figure out a way to do this every single day. So I've got a 3rd grade teacher in Franklin, Tennessee. It's her first thing every day. They walk in the room, and for 15 minutes, they do handwriting instruction. You cannot do this an hour twice a week. You can't do it. They will fatigue, wear out, blah, blah, blah. In the fall, your sessions are probably longer, and then it declines, lowers, whatever, as you go through the year, because in the spring, they're going to be doing more composing, spelling, sentences, paragraphs, what have you. They're going to get a bunch of the practice applied into the instruction. So that's why I was kind of stumped by my friend back here who was asking about a letter a day or what have you. Part of it is I'm doing more handwriting in the front than I am in the back, so I can probably go a little faster with that because I'm committing more time to that. Whereas in the spring, you got a kindergartner, you're not doing paragraphs or even sentences in September. They're still learning their letters. You've got more time to commit. And then you're going to kind of trade off later on. You say, I'm not doing as much letter formation work. I'm doing some connection letters like OT, super hard, etc. But I'm not in a mode where I'm needing to commit all that time, and I can commit more time to some of the other writing tasks. I also wrote an article, which is not on the big conference website, but it's available if you want to email me for it. It's a little bit chit-chatty. It's a little bit informal, but it does mention and cite a lot of the research. If you've got to convince somebody outside of this room, you're going to want some of that stuff. You may have to convince parents, you may have to convince school boards or administrators, other people in your team sometimes, etc. That's part of that conversation. I can tell you this, I'm a pretty strong-willed, tough guy. You can't do this that way. So different states are kind of making different choices on this. I had a super good time with you guys. I hope you had a great experience. I'll see you guys later on today in the conference. Okay?